Good day everyone, I am Geraldine Latorre and I will going to discuss the cell theory. Cell theory states that living things are composed of one or more cells, that the cell is the basic unit of life, and that cells arise from existing cells. So, cell theory is a scientific theory first formulated in the mid-19th century. So there are three parts of cell theory. The first one is all organisms are made up of one or more cells, meaning to say the cell is the basic unit of life and cells arise from other cells through cellular division. Second one, all cells come from pre-existing cells. So basically, everything your body does, it does because cells are directing the action. This means that cells don't just appear out of thin or known as spontaneous generation. The new cells are always made from current cells. And last, the cell is the basic unit of structure and organization that performs life functions. This means that cells form the parts of an organism and carry out all of the organism's processes or functions. So in complex organisms, cells are organized into 5 levels so that an organism can conduct all basic processes associated with life. The development and refinement of magnifying lenses and light microscopes made the observation and description of microscopic organisms and living cells possible. So many scientists contributed to the cell theory. And he is Anton Van Neuwenhoek. So he lived from 1632 to 1723. He made an improved single-lens microscope and he observed many kinds of living cells like algae, bacteria, protozoa, and multi-celled organisms. So Anton Van Leeuwenhoek's single most important discovery was the existence of single-cell organisms. He contributed to cell theory by believing that there were seeds or eggs too small to see by the eye being planted into food and other things. So his was a simple light microscope because it contained one lens and used natural light to view objects. He used single lens microscope which he made or just to make the first observations of bacteria and protozoa. The next scientist is Robert Hooke. In 1665, scientist Robert Hooke used a microscope to examine the slices of cork. He observed that cork is made of tiny, hollow compartments. The compartments reminded him of small rooms, so he gave the rooms the name cells. The plants Hooke observed were actually dead, and he was actually observing cell walls and empty space. And Hooke stated that the force required to extend or compress a spring is proportional to the distance of that extension or comprehension. So as you can see, this beautiful microscope was made for the famous British scientist, which is Robert Hooke, in the late 16th. And this microscope is one of the most elegant microscopes built during the period. While the other side of the picture, it illustrated the smallest complete parts of an organism, which he called cells. Next scientists, those are Theodor Schwann and Matthias Schleiden, stated that all living things are made of cells. So they studied cells of animals and plants. She then believed that cells were seeded by the nucleus and grew from there. Similarly, Schwann claimed that animal cells crystallize from the material between other cells. Next scientist is Rodolf Rashow. In 1855, a German medical doctor named Rodolf Rashow observed under the microscope cells dividing. He reasoned that all cells come from other pre-existing cells by cell division. So his greatest accomplishment was his observation that the whole organism does not get sick, only certain cells or group of cells. And lastly, in 1839, Schiden and Schwann worked together to detail the first two principles of cell theory. Approximately 20 years later, Rudolf Virchow completed cell theory when he determined that cells only come from other pre-existing cells. So that's all. Thank you and God bless.